What's up, everybody? This is Coffee with Max. I'm your host, Max. This is Coffee. So, today I'm going to talk about my buddy Taylor. Taylor, if you're watching this, you're the man. But I want to talk about Taylor because he's a great example of how we should all be with other people in the music industry who are pursuing music careers. So I met Taylor through the internet, I believe. He lives in the same area as me in Boulder. But we met online. He was promoting his book, The Sly Hat, and he's on his second edition now of The Sly Hat. Go check it out if you're a drummer. It's all about left foot independence. Awesome book. But he reached out to me, asked me if I could do a little video for him to promote his book, which I did. We stayed in touch through that, and eventually we met. I think he was performing on Pearl Street with his band, and we met and we became friends. And we've been friends since, it was 2-ish years ago, 3 years maybe, and he's my bud, So what I want to talk about, though, is Taylor and I, if we were not friends, if we just coexisted in Boulder, we would basically be in the exact same realm in terms of our market, in terms of where we're trying to go in our career. For example, he's writing a drum book, I'm writing a drum book. He did a clinic at this performance space called the Muse Performance Space in Lafayette. I did a clinic there because I heard of it through him. He teaches drum lessons, I teach drum lessons. He and I play the same gigs all the time. We'll sub for each other. So in terms of drumming, we're in the exact same spot in the music scene in Boulder, Denver area. And what's interesting is if we weren't friends, we would be enemies because we would be trying to compete with each other, trying to take each other's gigs, right? And I want to talk about that because I don't think that's ever effective. And I think you should always try to push your comrades in music and drumming, whatever instrument you're in, up, because eventually it will push you up. For example, let's talk about the Muse Performance Space. Taylor had written his book maybe a couple years before, and he came to me because he wanted to get some video done at this Muse Performance Space, right? And he said, I'm doing a drum clinic, and I would love some footage and maybe some photos, blah, blah, blah. My company, Fox Tracks, also does some local EPK packages and videos and photos and stuff like that. So sure, man, I'd be happy to help. If I hadn't been friends with him, if he had been a nemesis, so to speak, or competition, if we saw each other as competition, first of all, he probably wouldn't have come to me with that request. He's like, he's going to sabotage it, or I don't want this guy coming. He's not my friend. Or I might have declined if he asked me because of, I don't know, some kind of grudge or something. People are weird, and people in the music industry always try to get at each other's throats, and I don't ever understand that. We're all making music. It's the most peaceful, beautiful thing you could possibly imagine, and we should all be helping each other because the more you push somebody else up, the farther you can climb to get there, right? Does that make sense? If we're pushing each other down, trying to be at the top, you can't go anywhere from there. That's the top in your brain. But if you're pushing people up, that motivates you to get to that point too. So, wow, he did that with a little help. I bet you I can do that too. Anyway, so Taylor had this drum clinic. I came and filmed at the Muse. Because of that, because I went to the Muse, I met the owners. I filmed this drum clinic, gave them the footage and everything, and became good friends with the owners. And through that, my company, Fox Tracks Music, became really close friends with the Muse Performance Space. And now I did my drum clinic there. We do all kinds of recordings there. We do our EPK packages there. We film stuff there. We perform there all the time. And so I would have never made that connection if it weren't for me being open-minded and willing to support Taylor in his career. So I think that the more you can push somebody, the better it turns around and pushes you in turn. So another example would be in gigging. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing. So Taylor and I will trade gigs all the time. And I won't say the name of the band, but I did give him one gig that I didn't want to play, and I've never lived that down. It was for band who shall not be named that is not really. It's just an interesting type of music. We'll just put it that way. And I kind of gave it to Taylor with no explanation. I said, "Hey, do you want this gig? It's paying. It'll be fun." And he never lets me forget that. So I'm sorry about that. But I'll give him a gig. He'll give me a gig. We can't. We become tightly knit, and it becomes this thing where if Max can't make a gig, Max calls Taylor, and Taylor jumps on it. Vice versa. Instead of that band leader, when Max can't make a gig, the band leader doesn't call Jimmy or whoever. I don't know who Jimmy is. It doesn't go outside of that circle. So if I have a friend who's in my industry that I can call on to help me out, it keeps it closer. And when he can't make a gig, he has a favor to pay back to me if he wants. He's not required, but usually they do. And we just kind of help each other out, because we're drummers. That's the whole point of this whole thing, is that we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to make music and be successful in music. And the worst thing in the world is to have somebody trying to pull you down or tell you that you can't do this or you're not good enough. There is something to be said about that, though, and that is if you need to tell your buddy friend who's playing music that they need to work on something, then you need to tell them that they need to work on something. So, for example, if you have a guitar player friend who really just needs to take a couple of vocal lessons to push his singing in the right direction, it is your job as somebody who noticed that, who cares about that person's career, to come up to them someday in a very gentle way and tell them that, listen, man, you need to work with your vocals. You need to work on your vocals. If you want to get better at the things that you're doing, go take some vocal lessons. And it takes a true friend to give another friend constructive criticism and for nobody to get angry about it. But the times that I pushed myself the most directly followed the times that I had the harshest criticism from people. For example, I played this one gig in Boulder with a band I'm not going to name. It was like an R&B soul band. And we were playing at a bar, and one of the band members had a few beers with dinner before we played, and then maybe had a couple more afterwards, and then during the show, maybe a third, fourth, fifth, seventh, eighth. He was drunk. He was very drunk, and we were playing or performing, and you know what? It was late, and it was a bar, and I get it. Fine. But we were playing a song, and I'm exhausted, and I think I was going somewhere the day after. I think I had to pack up my bags and get on a plane or something the next day. I remember travel being part of that. I'm exhausted, and he threw a fit, man. I will never forget this. He turned around and he said something about like me picking up the tempo, and I'll take half the blame because I didn't want to hear that at that moment, and so I said something like, "Oh, it's fine, like the tempo is fine. It is where it is." And looking back, it may not have been fine. I was very tired. It could have been dragging or slowing down a little bit. I was exhausted. But he left the stage. He put his sax down. He left, and he didn't come back. Like, okay, I guess we'll skip the sax solo. And he came back after a little while, and he started calling me all kinds of names. He called me a baby. He said I sound like a baby, like an infant. I'm like, that hurt. You think I would be more hurt if he said something like, "Oh, you're a beep 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 beep," if he was cussing at me. But he called me. He said I sound like a baby. I was like, nobody's ever said anything so mean. So anyway, that really shook me up. Oh, I was going to Bozeman. I remember now. I had to drive to Bozeman the next day. I remember talking to my buddy about it and telling him about that experience, and I didn't have my drums that whole week after, and so it just kind of stewed up inside of me. But I'll tell you what, I worked my ass off on my tempo when I got back because of that criticism. It certainly was not as constructive or gentle as it could have been, but it was helpful nonetheless, and it pushed me to get better. So, if you want to do that in a nice way, make sure that you're telling your friends who you want to be successful, who should be everybody that you know, that if they need to work on something, if they need help with something, tell them to work on it. And I'm sure they would be glad to hear it. So, in conclusion, thank you for joining again. Be friends with people in your industry. It will benefit you in the long run. Support any musician you can. Try to avoid rivalries. There's no reason for it. The more you push somebody else, the more it pushes you. And third is, if you care about somebody and their career and you would wish the same to happen to you, give them constructive criticism when applicable and when you think it will actually help them. Same thing if you're going to a show and you really liked one song, don't go up to somebody after the show and say, "Hey man, you guys sounded great." God, I hate hearing that, because it doesn't mean anything to me, because that's exactly what my parents say every single show. I could play the worst, bless their soul, I love my parents, but I could play the worst show in the world and go up to my parents and say, that was really, oh man, that was rough. And my parents would be like, "Oh, you guys sounded great." And I'm like, "No, we didn't. We didn't sound great. We sounded terrible today, but it's okay, thank you." Anyway, so if you go to a show of a friend and you really enjoyed one song, tell them very specifically what you enjoyed about that song, what you enjoyed about that performance. "I really loved your stage presence on the third song you guys played, the one that was like, do-do-do-do-do. What song is that?" And they'll tell you the song. "Oh, I really love that song. It's great. Really well-written chorus or a really great verse. I love the lyrics. I love that guitar lick that you guys came up with." Anything specific, because as musicians, we are always grasping at affirmations and things that tell us that we're doing the right thing, because that's the thing about music, is it's so ambiguous in some sense that you have no idea if you're going down the right path. And so watch my video on getting a music mentor too. I think that was Coffee with Max number 2, if I remember correctly. But feedback and guidance can come from a mentor. It can also come from a buddy. So be the buddy that helps your buddy get better at what they do. Thanks for watching. This has been Coffee with Max. I appreciate you, and please let me know what I can do better. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, critiques, opinions, leave them in the comments, and subscribe if you want to support. Thank you.